Welcome to YouTube Pedia. Discover the greatest stories from history, science, and beyond. If you're curious about the world, subscribe now and join our journey through knowledge. Let's get started. Adolf Hitler, the rise of a dark legend from rejected artist to ruthless ruler. Before the swastika became a symbol of terror. Before the world plunged into the most destructive war in history. Before his name echoed through the ruins of Europe like a haunting whisper. He was just a boy. A boy named Adolf Hitler, born on April 20, 1889, in the quiet Austrian border town of Braunau im Inn, a place so small, so unremarkable, that it would seem absurd to imagine it as the origin of history's most notorious figure. His father, Adolf Hitler, was a stern and rigid customs official, emotionally cold and demanding. Adolf wanted his son to follow in his bureaucratic footsteps, but Adolf had no interest in state papers or rules. He was a dreamer, a loner, often lost in his imagination. His true love, art, sketching buildings, drawing fantastical scenes, he saw himself one day becoming a famous painter or architect. But his childhood was not filled with joy. The only warmth came from his mother, Clara, who adored him. Her love was perhaps the only gentle light in the shadows of his youth, but even that light would eventually dim. As a teenager, Hitler moved to Vienna, the cultural heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, to apply to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts. Twice he applied, twice he was rejected. His dreams shattered, his ego wounded, his pride suffocated. It was in Vienna, jobless, penniless, sleeping in homeless shelters, that Hitler's inner darkness began to take shape. The city was full of contradictions, wealth and poverty, beauty and filth, art and politics. And amid it all, Adolf absorbed radical ideas. He read about German nationalism, racial purity, and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Ideas that, in his twisted mind, gave him a purpose, something to blame for his failures, a target. In 1913, to avoid mandatory military service for the Austrian Empire, he fled to Munich, Germany. And when World War I erupted in 1914, Hitler eagerly enlisted in the German army. Finally, he had found something that gave him a sense of belonging: war. He fought bravely on the Western Front. As a messenger, he faced death many times. He was wounded twice and awarded the Iron Cross for bravery, an honor he would wear proudly for the rest of his life. But when Germany surrendered in 1918, everything changed again. The defeat hit him like a personal betrayal. He didn't see it as a military loss, but as a stab in the back. And like many Germans at the time, he blamed Jews, Marxists, and politicians. This myth of betrayal became the foundation of his ideology. After the war, Germany was in chaos. Economic collapse, political assassinations, hyperinflation, and humiliation under the Treaty of Versailles. People were starving, angry, and desperate. And that's when Adolf Hitler's voice started to rise from the ruins. In 1919, he joined a tiny fringe group, the German Workers' Party, a mix of nationalists and anti-Semites. Within months, he took over and renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. He wasn't just a speaker, he was a hypnotist of crowds. His speeches, filled with fury and emotion, gave the broken people of Germany a villain to blame and a promise of resurrection. He offered hope wrapped in hatred. In 1923, drunk on ambition, Hitler tried to overthrow the Weimar Republic with a coup in Munich, the Beer Hall Putsch. It failed. He was arrested and imprisoned, but the prison bars didn't silence him, they gave him a stage. Behind those cold, stone walls, he wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Part autobiography, part political manifesto, it laid out his disturbing vision for the future: the superiority of the Aryan race, the destruction of the Jews, and the conquest of Eastern Europe. It was dark, ominous, and tragically prophetic. When he was released, the world had changed. The Nazi Party had crumbled. But Hitler had learned something vital. He didn't need revolution, he needed democracy. He would rise through the very system he despised. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, Germany collapsed again, this time into economic depression. Unemployment soared, starvation returned, the fragile republic trembled, and Hitler came back stronger than ever, using powerful propaganda, emotional appeal, and paramilitary intimidation. By 1932, the Nazis had become the largest party in the Reichstag. And in January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, not by force, not by war, but by law. So the door to power had opened, and the world would never be the same. The fall of a tyrant from absolute power to ashes. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, many still underestimated him. They saw a loudmouth, a failed artist turned political agitator. But beneath the mustache and the dramatic speeches was something far more dangerous, a man obsessed with destiny. The moment he took office, Hitler began transforming Germany into a dictatorship. The Reichstag fire, a suspicious blaze that gutted the German parliament building, was used as a pretext to pass the Reichstag fire decree, a law that stripped Germans of their civil liberties. Arrests began, opposition parties were silenced, fear spread like wildfire. Then came the Enabling Act, a chilling name for a law that gave Hitler the power to rule by decree. Democracy was effectively dead. The Third Reich had begun. Within months, the Nazi regime launched a sweeping campaign to reshape society. Books were burned, the press was controlled. Education was poisoned with racial ideology. The Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, began arresting anyone who opposed the regime, politicians, artists, priests, and eventually, even neighbors who whispered the wrong words. But Hitler's obsession with control went far beyond Germany's borders. He had a vision of a greater German empire dominated by what he believed was the master race. In 1935, the Nuremberg Laws stripped Jews of citizenship and made anti-Semitism government policy. Jewish businesses were vandalized. Synagogues were burned. The world watched and did nothing. Then came 1939. Hitler had already absorbed Austria and Czechoslovakia, and now he wanted Poland. When his forces invaded on September 1, World War II began. Britain and France declared war. The world was plunged into darkness once again. Hitler's military strategy, Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was fast, brutal, and terrifying. Within months, Poland fell. Then Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and finally France. Hitler stood at the height of his power, ruling over most of Europe. But he wasn't finished. In 1941, despite their non-aggression pact, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, opening the Eastern Front in what would become one of the bloodiest theaters of war in history. He believed the Slavic people were inferior and that Russia's vast land was Germany's to conquer. At the same time, another horror unfolded in secret: the final solution. Hitler's world was built on hatred, and it was now devouring itself. In his private life, the image of the strong, heroic Führer was a lie. Hitler became increasingly isolated in his bunker-like headquarters. He was heavily dependent on drugs delivered daily by his personal physician. Paranoid, delusional, and mistrustful of his own generals, he dismissed intelligence, made rash military decisions, and watched as his once invincible army was pushed back. The turning point came at Stalingrad. Hitler refused to retreat. His army was surrounded, crushed. From that moment on, the Nazis were in retreat, and the end was only a matter of time. In 1944, he survived an assassination attempt from within his own ranks, Operation Valkyrie, but the cracks were showing. Allies pushed from the west, Soviets crushed from the east. Berlin was surrounded. In his final days, deep inside the Führer bunker, Hitler was a shell of the man who had hypnotized millions. His speeches were rambling, his body trembled, yet he clung to the delusion that somehow victory was still possible. On April 29, 1945, he married Eva Braun, his longtime companion, in a brief hollow ceremony. And the next day, as Soviet artillery thundered above them, Adolf Hitler put a pistol to his head and ended his life. Eva took poison. Their bodies were burned and buried in the rubble of Berlin. So the man who once held the world in his grip died in a hole in the ground, afraid and defeated. His dream of a 1,000-year Reich lasted barely 12 years. But the damage he left behind, cities reduced to ashes, tens of millions dead, generations scarred by war and genocide, remains one of humanity's darkest scars. Even today, historians, psychologists, and philosophers try to understand him. Was he insane, evil, a product of his time, or something more complex, a warning of what can happen when hate, fear, and unchecked power come together? Adolf Hitler didn't just change the world, he shattered it. If this story moved you, if you believe history should never be forgotten, then like, comment, and subscribe to YouTube Pedia, where we explore the stories that shaped humanity. Let us know in the comments what figure or topic you'd like us to uncover next.